This video is for everybody who wants to improve their cognitive performance and all the biohackers out there. I was recently in California for a vacation and had the chance to hang out with the guys from Neurohacker, the makers of Qualia Mind, which is, out of all the nootropics that I tested so far, it's my favorite nootropic stack out there. And yeah, I took the chance to visit them in Carlsbad in their new offices. I was one of the first people to try out their new liquid shot, which is a pretty crazy product. I'll make a review about that. Check out the link down below. And I met Greg Kelly. So Neurohacker Collective is really a unique nootropic company to me. There are a lot of bright minds working there with a big vision behind it. And Greg Kelly is one of them. Greg is the lead formulator. So he formulated this new nootropic energy shot, and he also formulated Eternus. And yeah, I really picked his brain on how does it work on a biochemical level, how do like 28 different ingredients in Qualia Mind actually work together to give me more focus, to boost my creativity, to make me more calm and present and aware. So I was like really happy to ask him those questions and now share that with you guys. If you feel after the interview you want to try out one of the Neurohacker products, you can use my discount code MAXHACK to save 15% of any Neurohacker order. And without further ado, enjoy this interview with Greg Kelly. Hey Greg, good to interview you. I'm super excited.
Thanks for coming all the way here to San Diego County, and we're in the Neurohacker Collective Rose Garden area. So
yeah, it's a beautiful garden.
Yep.
And yeah, our improvised interview location. So I've been trying out Qualia Mind for a while, and I also recommend it in my reviews because I feel like it has this really sustainable effect on my cognition. I feel like I'm more aware, I'm more focused when I work on something. And I see like there are I think 24 active ingredients in it.
28 in Qualia Mind and 24 in Qualia Focus.
Yeah. How does it work? And you are the lead formulator.
Yes, yeah.
Can you just go a bit deeper into it and just explain to me how does it actually work?
Sure. I would think there's a couple big buckets. So one of the main things that we wanted to do with Qualia, all the Qualia products would have this in common, is that we want to support both acetylcholine and dopamine pathways. Because for most of what we think is the prized cognitive functions, so things with attention, alertness, memory, a lot of the things that would produce motivation, those come out of either the dopamine pathway or the combination of both the acetylcholine and dopamine. So,
and what does it mean when you say a pathway?
Yeah, so a pathway, like if we take acetylcholine as an example, when we think of a pathway, they usually start with some building block. And these pathways are to build neurotransmitters, so the things that communicate in our brain. So they start with some building block molecule. In the case of acetylcholine, the building block is choline, which at least in the US, it's not something that there's a daily value for. So there's no RDA for it like a vitamin, but there's a recommended amount, and the Institute of Medicine has published in the past, they think about 4 out of 5 American adults don't get that much. So choline would be a relative deficiency. So you always need to start and make sure you've got at least an adequate amount of the core molecule to make the neurotransmitter. Yeah. And then when we think of the pathway, we're thinking of all the steps that go from that to making the neurotransmitter.
All right, okay.
Right, so there's usually a couple enzymes in between. And so what ends up happening in most pathways, there's one enzyme that's where things are slow. So it's the traffic jam point. So that in biochemistry, that's the rate limiting enzyme. So then we look for things that can upregulate that. And quite often they're compounds from an herb or like a polyphenol, some plant-based compound. Sometimes it'd be a cofactor because a lot of enzymes will use maybe magnesium, a B vitamin, things like that. And so another part of our pathway support is we're always trying to especially address that bottleneck. because you could put all kinds of the substrate in. If it's not flowing through that pathway, you're just going to build up a backflow, which in complexity science, especially in economics, there's an idea of externalities. Is that a term you know? But externalities basically are when you don't think out the problem well, and it sounds like a good idea, but then some unintended bad thing happens. And there could be good externalities as well. So if you give a whole bunch of a substrate, which we see some products do, and don't pay attention to the flow through the pathway, then over time, less good things can happen.
So if you're like not balancing it right or addressing the right pathways or the right steps of that, you could actually take like too much of something and then bad things can happen from that?
Yeah, over time you're essentially creating like a traffic jam, right? Because everything can't flow through that pathway.
Right.
Right, and then that's when not good things can happen, right? One of the things that our cells do, our brain does, our whole body does, is we adapt to things, right? So that's a constant game. Like the way I would describe it in complex systems, the rules of the game are changed as we play the game, right? So to prevent that, we don't want to like hit something so hard that it creates like a bottleneck, because then adaptation is going to happen fast and typically in a way we don't want it to.
So how do you approach it with Qualia Mind? Like how do all of these ingredients work together?
So often the way I think of it is mini stacks, right? So there's like an acetylcholine stack, there's a dopamine stack, there's a stack to support essentially long-term potentiation. So that's how we build memories over time. There's a stack that supports mitochondria making energy, because a huge part of being focused, having executive functions, being motivated requires brain energy. And the core thing that builds energy are mitochondria. So we want to make sure we support those. So one of the reasons Qualia has so many different ingredients is it's trying to do a lot of different things.
Let's go. I would like to go deeper into like maybe one of the ingredients or one of the pathways to try to understand it even deeper.
Sure.
So for example, when you say you need to give energy to the mitochondria, how do we do it with Qualia Mind?
So when you think of mitochondria, there's I always like to start from one thing. Like mitochondria aren't one thing or one. So stepping back, if you see a picture of a cell in a biochemistry book, anatomy book, you're going to usually see a couple mitochondria in a cell. But the truth is there's anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand or more. So it's really this network, and network's another term you hear in complexity science. So in networks, it's the interaction of all of them. So what you care about with mitochondria is creating a fitter network, a network that can pump out more ATP when it needs it. And then the things that it uses to make energy, like a core thing would be fats and sugars. So we don't supply those. Most people got those bases covered. What we want to do is make sure that we're helping your mitochondria create that fitter network. And so ingredients like PQQ would play into that.
Okay. And could you explain how that works, like on a molecular level even?
Yeah, so what, there's really, I would, like, this oversimplifies it, but there's two processes that compete to reshape the mitochondrial network. One's called mitochondrial biogenesis, and what that means is you're giving birth to new mitochondria. So an easy way to think of it is if you lifted weights, your muscles are going to get bigger so that you can lift more weights in the future. Mitochondrial biogenesis is like the mitochondrial equivalent of that. If we stress them the right ways, they get bigger and stronger for the future.
Okay.
And then the flip side of that coin is it's called mitophagy. So it's the mitochondrial equivalent of autophagy, where less efficient mitochondria are being recycled so that those parts can be made into new fitter ones.
Okay.
So that balance is always going on. And when we think in terms of like mitochondrial support at Neurohacker, what we're usually talking about is a combination of those two things, supporting things that would help build up a fitter network, but also giving support to things that would help you tear down and recycle the mitochondria that aren't as efficient.
So like the weak ones die off and then new ones are produced, and the new ones are probably more fitter, and then
Correct.
all the time, like the weaker ones die off and more fitter are there.
Right, and that's a big part of what some things like fasting does. Like it selectively gets rid of the damaged ones so that those proteins can be used to make new, better things.
Wow.
So that you want to
yeah.
support the mitochondrial network, but then you want to give things that support mitochondrial energy production, and in a sense, like I said, NAD would be things that boost NAD, add in there.
That would also be probably really relevant for Eternus, right? The
For
product.
sure, Eternus was designed like laser focused on making cellular energy.
Like Eternus is the one that you started from the ground up. You made the concept for it.
Yeah.
How did that process start? Like, how did you figure out which ingredients you take and how they work together?
Well, it started really from our desire. So most things, so the things that you said Qualia has helped you with, focus, getting more work done, things like that. Like stepping way back, like to do more work, we need more energy, right? And anything that takes effort is work. So whether that's mental effort or physical effort or the effort our cells would put into keeping themselves healthy. And so when it came to Eternus, we decided, okay, what we really want to do is understand all the things that help the cells make more energy. So that led to boosting NAD, led to things that help upregulate the capacity to make ATP. It led to spending a lot of time understanding how mitochondrial networks reshape themselves, and then doing things to essentially toughen them up so that they would, essentially have the same kind of response you would get from exercise.
Yeah. And there are, I will link it up for the people watching this video. There are some animated explanations of how mitochondria work and ATPs. And I watched all of that to try to understand Eternus.
Yep.
But I'm still like, okay, how do the ingredients now go to the cells really on a biochemical level to make that happen?
Well, so I think,
can you go deeper into one of those and try to explain it kind of visually?
I think sometimes when we get too bogged down, the more we learn about, I guess stepping back, 20 years ago, we didn't know about Sirtuins, which are a pro-longevity pathway. So we learn new things. Like the deeper we look, the more things we find that we didn't know existed before, right? So it's important from our perspective to understand that science. And it's also from a complexity science, what you really care about is what's called holism, right? There's certain things that occur on the level of the whole that you can't even predict from the cellular responses, right? So while we care about understanding all the pathways, so resveratrol would be the classic thing that boosts Sirtuins. But resveratrol does all kinds of other things. We've found out in the last couple of years that it changes our gut microbiome. It activates natural killer cells, which help kill off senescent cells. So resveratrol was originally categorized as a sirtuin activator, but the truth is it does all kinds of things, right? Some that, many more that we know it does today than 10 years ago, but probably far less than we'll know it does 10 years from now, right? And so, and the truth is, so just for the audience, resveratrol is something that is made by lots of plants, but grapes would be the biggest food source and where it was originally ID'd. And it's made at the edges of seeds and in the skin. So what most directly impacts or interacts with the environment. And really, resveratrol is something that responds to the environment. So if we put grapes in a more stressful environment, it's drier, the sun's brighter, there's pests around, then the grapes will make more resveratrol because it's essentially part of its defense mechanisms against those. And when we then consume the resveratrol, it acts with our kind of entire stress system to, in a sense, forewarn us that, oh, the environment's pretty tough. We better toughen up to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And that toughening up affects mitochondria, it affects just a scads of things, right? So we could get really deep into the minutia, but in the holism perspective, what resveratrol does, it communicates something about the environment to both our gut and our cells, and then those respond to be better prepared. And then that better prepared is what gives us our benefits.
It's really interesting to see that parallel of the grape and the plant, and then how it works in your body, kind of the same way. That's interesting,
It's called Xenohormesis, basically, is the idea, like these things in our environment, when we consume them, it's actually giving us a hermetic response, something that is helping us adapt better in preparation for the environment.
One more question that I have about Eternus, because I think I tried it for a couple of weeks, but it's not like, for me, it's not like Qualia Mind where I really feel it. How do I know that it works? Like, is there like any way to measure it or to be like, okay, it works?
Yeah, so there are two completely different like approaches. So Qualia was really designed, one of the goals for Qualia was that people should be able to feel something the day they take it, and definitely over the first 5 days to a week, notice a big difference. Eternus, our idea was we wanted people to gradually experience it over a month to 2 months. And so with our testing that we did with Eternus, what we saw over one full cycle, so what we would think of as 5 days on, 2 days off for 4 weeks, was a fair amount of people noticed much more, better quality sleep. So improved sleep.
So that's pretty measurable.
A lot of people noticed something to do with workouts. One of the main things I heard was productivity, where some of our test audience was on Qualia, some wasn't. It was almost a 50-50 split. But one of the common themes with both is that they felt like they had more energy at the end of the day to get things done they weren't getting to. So that productivity, but late in the day. Another thing that we saw with a small group of people was a big change in their body composition quickly. So we had a few people that were in their 50s and had really struggled to put on any good quality lean mass. And just in those 4 weeks at the gym, being measured by their trainers, they gained a couple of pounds.
And they were on Eternus?
They were on Eternus,
Eternus, okay. Eternus, you pronounce it.
Okay. And so really one of the ways we would think of it, our cells have to do a whole bunch of stuff. And to do that requires energy, right? It's work, it takes effort. And so depending on the things our cells aren't getting to, that's where typically it's going to show up, right? So like if you're already sleeping pretty well, you're not going to notice sleep. But it's more subjective. And then the thing that we were surprised at was that somewhere maybe about 1 out of 4 people actually do notice something really quickly. Because it wasn't at all part of our plan. So we were surprised that we have many more percentage of people than we expected that have told us that within 5 days they're starting to notice some things.
Yeah, I have like a full bottle at home, so my plan is really to try it out for at least a month, but better like 2-3 months to see like the long-term effects of it. Interesting. And so today I came here and tested the new liquid shot, the Qualia liquid shot. What was the intention behind that?
So
create that product.
So the original goal was to take Qualia Mind and turn it into something that you could just do in a 2-ounce shot. And the truth is, there's just too many things that taste bad in that. And so we finally gave up. But what we tried to do was find a formula that would give those same subjective benefits in a different formula that we could use things to make it taste better. So instead of 28 ingredients, it has 12, but the goals would be the same: support acetylcholine, support dopamine, do things that give the brain more energy so it can get to the things that take more effort. So one of the things with, I was just interviewed about 2 weeks ago, and the premise of the interviewer was that when working out, there's probably some things that benefit from being tuned in when we're working out, and then others, if we're zoned out, then that would be good. And I essentially corrected the person and said, no, like if we're working out, our best results come from being tuned in more of the time, whether it's lifting weights, whether it's aerobics, whether it's yoga.
What do they mean by tuned in?
tuned in, so focused, right? So that idea of flow, like
Yeah.
when you get in that flow state, whether it's in a sport, whether you're lifting weights, you want to be hyper focused. So one of the studies I shared with this interviewer was they essentially measured what was a curling exercise for 4 weeks, and it was super lightweight, so 30% of max weight, so really lightweight. And one group they had as a control, they didn't do any curling motions. Another one, they said, okay, during the exercise, do whatever you want. And they put a video on in the background. And the third group, they said, okay, every time you move the arm, we want you really concentrating on moving the muscle. Like really feel what it's like to move the muscle. And then over those 4 weeks, they let them do it and measured strength gains at the end of the month. So what do you think happened?
Probably the third group had like the most strength gains because they were focused on the muscle.
Right. So this was again lightweight. So usually you wouldn't expect much from lightweight. So the lightweight group that was just kind of zoned out, right, watching TV, had almost no strength gain. The control group that did nothing, they actually got weaker. And the group that was really focused, put the mental effort in along with the physical effort, they gained about 20% in strength, right? So it doesn't really matter what like athletic thing we look at. If you're tuned in, focused, get into a flow state, which all those things take mental effort, which is energy, then you're going to get much more benefit for the time you spent. Where if you're zoned out, really not paying attention, then you're just...
I would think that's even beyond the physical, like with anything you exercise, if you're like super present and aware.
For sure, it's one of the, like I've joked about it over the years. I've met a fair number of people that tell me they're meditators, but if you measure their heart rate variability, some other things, they're not super healthy. So it doesn't seem to be working for them to the degree I would expect, at least. Then you meet other people that meditate and it's definitely working for them. Now my guess is, so one thing we do know is people that are exceptional meditators put a lot of mental effort into meditating, right? So they're working really hard, and I would guess a lot of other people that say they're meditating are doing more zoning out, right? Which it's subjective. You can't measure that unless you measure brain waves. And so most things we only are going to get out what we put in terms of effort and energy.
Yeah.
So coming back to the Qualia liquid shot, I mean, I just tried it out the first time, and I really felt it after like 2-3 minutes. It's really, really interesting to take this shot and after 2-3 minutes feel like kind of like increasing awareness and focus. It felt for me really like taking Qualia Mind, but just instantly.
It was one of our goals was that it would be faster onset. So I typically take Qualia Mind first thing in the morning before going to the gym.
Yeah.
But I live close to the gym. So I'll get there and Qualia Mind kicks in more midway through my workout. And so the goal for the shot was by the time I got to the gym that I'd already be feeling it.
And
what are the ingredients that kind of work that I feel instantly? Is it just the caffeine? Or and what are the things that kind of continue to work throughout the day if you take one of these shots?
So we think one of the ingredients in it is a proprietary branded ingredient called New Level. And what it is, it's essentially an arginine and nitric oxide booster. And it's a dipeptide. It's essentially like a proprietary thing that helps arginine go up in the blood a lot quicker than if we actually took L-arginine. But one of the things that arginine and nitric oxide do is they really boost circulation. Right, so adding that in, we think, is a big part of why people feel it quicker. So that ingredient on its own, we know typically there's a subset of people that will feel that within about 15 minutes.
yeah.
So that we think is a piece of it. A piece I think is just, a liquid is more bioavailable than, breaking down a capsule. And
Does it go because it's under the tongue as well so fast, or does it just get digested so fast?
I don't think so. I mean, there's been some efforts to study what's called like mouth rinsing with carbohydrates, where you swish a carbohydrate or sugar solution around in your mouth. And there's been some studies that have reported better effects on exercise, a whole bunch that haven't. But there's probably something where we're tasting that our brain does activate quicker. So.
And how long, or what was the concept of how long do these shots last in the effect?
So our goal always is long, like, more productive hours is better. When in our testing, we asked people how long it lasted for, and we talked earlier before we were on camera that there's a huge range of how people respond to things. So what we saw is there was, in terms of how quickly some people felt it, some were like you, almost right away. Others within a half hour, others within an hour. And in terms of how long it lasted, there was some that said more than 8 hours. There was a lot that said 4 to 8 hours. There was some that it was just under 4 hours. So it was a pretty good range, but we honestly expect that. Like, one of the things you and I talked about is we're, just from a complexity science, is this idea of human individuality, right? So to try to get something that works for everyone, you end up with something that doesn't work very well for almost anyone. So our goal isn't to make something that's going to rock for everyone. We don't honestly feel that's likely, but we try to really adjust recipes until we get something that has a good to excellent response for 4 out of 5 people. In our testing of whether it was Eternus, the Qualia products, the new liquid shot, that's like when we hit that threshold, we feel like, okay, we've achieved something that there's going to be a good response for enough people to make it worth having our name on it.
How would you compare the liquid shot to like the standard energy drinks or just having a coffee? What do you think is the benefit difference between those?
Sure. So the way I tend to describe it is, think of cognitive performance like a pyramid. So the bottom layer is being awake, right? If you're not awake, you can't get anything higher up. So caffeine is by far the best thing that creates arousal, right? Like anti-sleepiness. And so that's always your base. And then the next level up is what's called attention. So those are the, like without attention, you can't get to motivation, executive functions, working memory, things higher up. So caffeine also does that, but that's where cholines come in. Like, so what you'll see in energy drinks, L-theanine, sometimes, not always, but in good ones you'll usually see that. You'll see caffeine. You'll often see a choline source. All those things are really mostly building that attention layer of the pyramid. And then the next level up is executive function. So do you know much about that?
No, please explain.
Okay, so executive functions are the higher level things you would need to be a high performing executive, right? Planning, goal setting, working memory, being able to choose to do good things and choose not to do bad things, like that's called inhibition. Another thing is called cognitive flexibility, basically being able to take multiple sides of an issue or to engage creativity. So all those things, you can't get to those things if you're not awake and have attention. But that's the sweet spot, right? Like we want people to have more of that because that's what helps us really be high performers, whether it's at the gym, at work. And so one of the things that we would say makes the shot much different is we focused on that. So
like
things,
the full triangle or more the upper part versus just the
yeah,
lower
like
part?
we wanted, you can't have the upper part without the bottom part, but what I would say is we kept going where others tended to stop, right? They're hyper focused on things that support arousal and attention, which is why often you'll see high amounts of both choline and caffeine. So those are important, and they're not enough if we want to perform these higher level things. And then further on the pyramid is what I would think of as social cognition. So those are things like empathy, communication with others, being able to put yourself in another person's shoes, all of those things. And what generally happens when we have only a limited amount of mental energy, like we can only put out so much effort, we only get to the lower things on the pyramid. So like our goal and part of our, I guess, test to see if the product was what we wanted was were people getting to some of those higher things.
Wow.
Right?
And can you actually measure the influence on like empathy and social skills with that?
So there are questionnaires for empathy. We haven't done that with this product yet, but what we did in our survey is we asked things that would get at that, like how they were doing communicating with colleagues at work, before after, things like that.
Wow, that would be like a totally new target group, I guess.
Yeah, so one of the things even with me, so what we've seen with Qualia Mind is different people experience completely different things. So we tend to hear themes. So procrastination, we sometimes joke about it as the procrastination killer, because there's a subset of people that feel like, oh, I don't procrastinate when I'm on it. The other people, memory. And so procrastination was something I noticed right away, like within a couple days. But my memory is pretty good, so I've never noticed any big change. A good friend of mine, his memory is horrible. 30 days in, he's like, can't believe it, doing great with my memory. But one of the things I noticed about 6 weeks in was I was way more patient with people, especially at the end of my day, driving home in traffic, going out with friends. Things that used to kind of get under my skin just weren't bothering me. And I think that's because that social piece is higher up. So emotional resilience is sometimes how we would describe it.
Interesting.
So one of the, I guess, like, since ultimately all the Qualia products, whether it's Mind, Focus, or the new shot, I tend to think of it, these are things that let you put more effort into the things the brain is doing. And wherever that effort reservoir was running dry before, if you have a little bit more, there's now should be things that you weren't getting to before or weren't doing as well, whether that's, focus, executive functions, or in the social domain.
Interesting. Maybe one last question. Do you know gaming boosters?
So for like esports?
Yeah, like this thing. Because, what do you think about those? And would it, because I was thinking like, I saw like back in Germany and Switzerland, there was like this new gaming booster company coming up, and I didn't know any about that. And I was thinking like, why don't you just take like Qualia Mind instead? What's your thought on gaming boosters and using Qualia for that?
We think it would be awesome. It's something that we plan on exploring, and we think the shot's a perfect fit for that.
For gaming boosters.
Yeah, and that ingredient I mentioned, New Level, that's actually been studied in like people doing video games.
In esports as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Greg, thank you so much for this interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was really interesting to talk to you.
Hey biohackers, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Greg Kelly as much as I did. I learned a lot from him, and if you want to try out any of the Qualia Neurohacker products, you can use my discount code MAXHACK to get 15% off any order, and you can even combine it with the first month subscription discount, which means you get like the first product was like 60% or more off in the first month. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to learn more about biohacking and nootropics, subscribe. I'm doing a lot of experiments and exploring flow, biohacking, and consciousness. And thank you for watching my video.